Well, if you have company on the 14ers, there are many people in rural Colorado, particularly in Commerce, who wish more people would stop by. We turn to Erika Gonzalez. You've traveled the state and found there some people out there who are not selling the way they'd like.
Well, that's right. I think what you're finding is that the closer you are to the Front Range or to some of the bigger highways such as I-70 or I-25, there are still people going to those locations, but when you get to Durango or Ouray or Pagosa Springs, the people are just not coming there.
Durango and Cortez in southwestern Colorado have had a significant dip in the number of people staying at hotels and motels.
Right. And part of that might be is the fact that there's no statewide promotion going on right now. So people that used to go to those places from Texas, Chicago, all over the country, just don't know about Durango and Ouray anymore. Another problem I've heard is that hotel rates are also rising, and that might be causing people to stay away or camp or go to some other places that might be cheaper.
The other side of that picture is the large metro areas are seeing more people, and the hotel rates there are higher.
Right, and the reason why that is that Denver in particular has done a great job of attracting conventions and meeting business. So they've got their own Convention and Visitors Bureau that's doing a lot of promotion. Even cities like Boulder are bringing in conventions, just meetings, so that's helping balance out the fact that we don't have statewide tourism promotion.
Promotion for the ski areas keeps the audience coming there. But if you take the small communities, well, you cited Creed down near South Park on Highway 160. The business has just dropped terribly in the last 2 years.
Right, and you look at some place like Creed, there's a lot of people in Colorado who've never heard of Creed before. They're the kind of community that really needs somebody in the state promoting them to Texans, to people in New Mexico, and without that, they don't really know what to do, and this is a community that's never had an aggressive campaign of its own out there. So some of these smaller communities are getting smarter, and they're figuring out that they do need to market themselves in absence of statewide promotion.
Longwoods International, well, it's a Canadian group,
Right.
says that Colorado has lost $1.7 billion in taxes since the tax was stopped.
Right, that was in late 1993. So they're figuring from 1994 to, I think last year is how that figure is gathered. But a lot of people still question that figure. It's very hard to really estimate how much money tourism brings in. There's a lot of multipliers that go into that. So that has come under fire from critics.
The Western Colorado business organization Club 20 says maybe we ought to get some businesses together and raise some money or reinstitute some form of tax.
Well, what they want is, and they're very careful to stay away from saying that they want a tax. What they want to do is get the state to commit to some sort of funding, but they want to give that back to the state taxpayers in the form of tax revenue, so that they might have some sort of loan, in essence, from the state that they would pay back so that Coloradans could actually see the benefits of tourism.
So along the way, if it brought more tourists to the state, then the money would go back to the state and everyone would be a winner, particularly the small towns.
Well, right, because what they're saying is essentially you and me, anyone, could get that money back, and possibly even the form of a refund, as they're talking about right now with their surplus.
Erika Gonzalez of the Rocky Mountain News. One item that brings people to Colorado? Why, it's the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos want a new stadium, and eventually the 6 metro counties may vote on it, but it's going to be a bumpy task from here to there, and Imse?
There's a lot of questions still to be answered, and we're hoping that someone raises them at the stadium board. First question is, who owns the team? We're getting really different answers on that. For starts, it was Pat Bowlen, whom everyone thinks it owns the Broncos. But when we pointed out that Canadian court documents indicate it's not Pat Bowlen, the team admitted that in fact the team is owned by a family trust, and the trustee of the beneficiary of that trust is not Pat Bowlen, but his 82-year-old mother. Pat Bowlen and his siblings don't get the team until after she dies.
Pat Bowlen is often referred to as owner of the Broncos, though that's an overstatement. His, I guess, the exact title is managing partner?
Technically, and his people say he's got, somehow he's got it lined up so that he's got lifetime control of the team, but they won't even tell you how, if there's a contract or what means there is that gives him this lifetime control.
Now, the question of the trusts that provide the money to make the Broncos happen. Now, where is that trust, or are there trusts in Canada and?
The Bahamas? It's a very good question. There are documents that indicate that the trusts are in the Bahamas. The team says no, they moved to Canada. We called the man who's supposed to be the trustee of the trust, and he said, I don't have anything to do with the Broncos. Until, of course, we said, the team says your trust owns the Broncos, and then he changed his tune.
The people who represent Pat Bowlen say, you know, this isn't a salient point. What we really need are the taxpayers to say they want to have a new stadium.
Well, that's certainly what the Broncos need. But if the taxpayers want to keep the team here over the long haul, they need to make their deal with the real owner of the team. And they need to make a deal that includes all kinds of guarantees. And of course, there are a lot of different opinions about what those guarantees should be and whether people should own a piece of the team or what.
Originally, we anticipated this issue would be on the November ballot, as it slipped at least until next year. But as it stands today, and that could change, it would be a question of $160 million supported by taxpayers and about $60 million by the Broncos. There's no guarantee the Broncos could cover the $60 million.
There's, well, at this point, there's no guarantee. It's up to the six-county stadium board to put in some sort of guarantee. But the real question is, what if there are cost overruns? Broncos can theoretically go to a bank if they have enough credit and borrow $60 million. But what if the price goes to 80 or 100 or 120? What kind of guarantee is there that we're not going to wind up with a half-built stadium and then run out of money?
This issue is not likely to go away.
Hardly. There's a lot more issues cropping up. The whole question of just how much it's going to cost to shut down Mile High and to build a new stadium are things that we're just going to start finding out in the next several months.
Undoubtedly more to come from Imse and Lou Kilzer, the Rocky Mountain News. Two other subjects of this week. It's a state law. Smoking is not permitted on school grounds, but some schools permit it. And Schrader.
Well, this past week, the State Health Department released its 1997 report on tobacco use and access by youth. And like all report cards, or at least mine, there was good news and bad news. The good news is that 19 more school districts have gone tobacco-free, so now there's 122. But the bad news is that some of the school districts have sort of done some backsliding. They've sort of relented on allowing the kids to go ahead and smoke on the school grounds under a clause in the state law that says for extraordinary circumstances. Now, for instance, Cherry Creek school districts ran into this, and they had kids crossing the road to go smoke off the school grounds, and some of them were hit by cars. So out of fear of their safety, they relented and built a place for the kids to smoke. Cherry Creek this summer, though, has said, okay, no more smoking as of next year. So they're back in the plus column, but that doesn't show in this year's report. The Denver Public Schools has voted to go smoke-free. So we now have Cherry Creek, Jefferson County, and Denver Public Schools that are tobacco-free. And those are the three largest school districts in the state. So the good news is that there are more kids that are in tobacco-free situations than ever before, but there's still a lot of work to do.
And much of the emphasis will be don't let them buy the tobacco products.
That's also a law in a number of communities. 14 communities this year voted to restrict possession and purchase of tobacco by minors under the age of 18. This is by things such as banning vending machines, having somebody go to a clerk and purchase it rather than being able just to take the pack of cigarettes. You have to ask for it. So there's 14 communities, and some of them are like Salida and Glendale. I mean, they're all over the state.
Each year, 14,000 teenagers start smoking. It's about 40 a day, I believe.
40, and that's just in Colorado.
Yes.
And the whole report is based on studies that show that if you start smoking before you're 18 years old, chances are you're going to get hooked. And unfortunately, about 3/4 of Colorado teenagers have tried cigarettes by the time they're 18. So the whole focus of this prevention effort is to cut this off and not subject the kids to these kind of situations where they smoke at school or it's easy to purchase, so that they can prevent people from being smokers in the future.
In the national picture, Colorado is registered as among the 10 healthiest states, but this issue of young people smoking is a definite negative.
Well, that's what the state health director said. First she said it was a little black mark. She said actually it's a major one, because smoking has such repercussions on healthcare costs and things of that nature. So Colorado is going to be working in the next year on supporting legislation, state and federal regulations, working with communities on these youth access ordinances and things of that nature.
And Imse.
And is there any sense of why kids start when it's become so unpopular among the rest of society?
Well, a lot of it is marketing, and unfortunately, teenage girls are particularly vulnerable to this, and there have been studies on that. But it's like the Joe Camel stuff that they've backed off on, and I mean it's a form of rebellion. It always has been. I mean, when I was in school in the '60s, it was that way too. But that's why they start.
Medical reporter Ann Schrader, a different topic. At the University of Colorado Medical Center, over the years we've had several controversies about the use of dogs at the hospital. There's a little bit of a rejiggling of things about new students using dogs for tests.
Well, beginning this spring, which is when they have these labs that are called the dog labs, students will have an option of not participating on moral, ethical, or religious grounds. This is a break from the last couple of decades that have required students to participate in these labs. They use dogs that are anesthetized. They do a variety of procedures on them. They cut them open and watch the heart beating, things of that nature. And the instructors say the dogs feel no pain, but nonetheless, the dogs are sacrificed at the end of it.
Joe Verrengia.
I don't think that anybody enjoys the gorier aspects of this kind of an issue, but I wonder if there's any kind of study that's been done about the skills and the effectiveness of a physician who hasn't been through that kind of a lab setting and hasn't gotten used to the idea of having their hands up to their elbows in guts.
Well, there's a lot of medical schools that don't do this. They've gotten away from it. But they still say the immediate viewing of an actual heart beating and running catheters into blood vessels and so on, you can't duplicate, even by the wonderful computer simulations you have. But I don't know if there's really been any studies, but I mean, most of the students do support. They think it's valuable. They think they learn something from it. They just don't want to be forced to do it.
This is part of the first year physiology labs, just to give them a sense of the animal's operation.
That's right. And a number of years ago, there was a lawsuit filed at CU campus on a young woman who was a Muslim who did not want to participate for religious reasons. And she eventually received a settlement, and they allowed that on religious grounds. But the student body, although most of them are going to be taking this, there's no anticipation that a number of people are going to opt out. They wanted to do it on moral and ethical grounds too.
Medical reporter Ann Schrader of the Denver Post. That's our broadcast for this week. For my colleagues, I'm Don Kinney. Have a good weekend.
Funding for the state of Colorado is provided by the Adolph Coors Foundation, the Monfort Family Foundation, and public service companies Wind Source, bringing wind energy to Colorado. The State of Colorado, now in its 19th year, is produced in cooperation with Rocky Mountain Reflections. The State of Colorado provides background on issues of this week, Friday at 7:30 and Sunday at 1:30.